Hey, John. Hey, Robert. Hey, Sky. Um, I know John and I've known Robert through Facebook, I guess, for many years. Anyway, I think what attracted me is Robert wrote down things that many of us have been aware of but have not spoken publicly because they're not widely accepted. So I think Robert made some things very clear that people like John and I have been thinking about or looking at for many years. And so, Robert, I enjoyed your interview on Batgap and that work that got me to buy your book.
Well, actually, I thought of what you just said this last week when the Trump book came out. Exactly, that book just says things that everybody really knows, but the guy actually just says it instead of wrapping it up in some kind of how wonderful my intuition is and I'm connected to the cosmos and all that bullshit.
Right,
Just say,
right.
just say what you see. Be an ordinary human, and we can discuss these things in a real way.
Right, right.
You don't have to come off like some kind of expert to deal with these questions. In fact, John's comment I like very much, John Troy, because that's how I feel about it. When you get to the end of the book, you should know a lot less than you thought you did when you started reading that book. A lot less.
Right.
A lot of things like Nisargadatta, new truth, that should be gone. That thing you used to know is not something you know. It's something you came to believe. And as a psychologist, I must say, I've read a lot about how we come to believe things, and it's not a simple process. We just imagine that our intuition will guide us, but our intuition is frankly very distorted by what we call cognitive bias. I went into that in the book a little. I don't want to give a talk on it now, but it's very interesting. And so I think this kind of thing that's happening, the excitement about this book and the interest in it, is exactly what you said. We all really know this in our hearts, that we don't know the truth about anything.
Right.
Yes, all we know is we're here. That's what we really know.
Sometimes we doubt that.
So then you get these people that everyone keeps asking me about, the famous gurus, and like Rupert, everybody loves Rupert. Well, he'll sit there and say, my being here allows me to have the intuition of an eternal consciousness. And it's just babble. He can feel that way, and that's fine. I mean, that's fine by me. But if we just look into how the mind itself works in an everyday way, we're walking around deluded. All of us. And I think most of us are willing to admit that I really don't know. And I get all these feelings about things. I don't know where the feelings came from, yet they're driving me and influencing me to do things and say things and pursue things. But if I just sit here, I don't feel that pressure to become anything. I just sit here with whatever I've got. And I know that what I've got is not some kind of holy state that people have to aspire to become, through arduous practice. I know that in myself, without a doubt, really, on a human level. And I think that is not being expressed very widely in what you call the spirituality community. Because as I'm finding out, it doesn't really sell books. You guys like my book, and it's going to be a kind of a cult classic, I guess, in a way. But I think that the publisher who saw this book and really liked it, kept it for a long time, and then turned it down with an excuse, really wanted to publish it, but it would have negated the content of so many of the books that they already did publish. I could be entirely wrong. That might be my fantasy, but I feel that after the last meeting, it's 2 weeks, I got a lot of feedback, and I started thinking, why is this book working like this? I mean, these are all super intelligent people sitting here. This isn't some kind of mass audience that just wants to hear bullshit. So how come all of these intelligent people, experienced people, are so interested in this book? And it seems profound. And it is. And I asked myself, how did that happen? I think it happened because I'm not lying. And I think most of the spiritual teachers are lying. Some of them know it, some don't really know it, but they're all lying. Not all, most are lying. They're lying when they teach us that there's something else that you don't have now, and there's this way of getting it. That's a lie, and that's the lie that keeps us all going around and around and around and around, and thinking if I could only just understand a little bit more of what Nisargadatta was really saying, then I would somehow be one with the absolute like he was. And the thing is that he was one with the absolute because of what I'm talking about. He just was. There's nothing more absolute after all than just being here. That's all we got. That's the rock bottom. Okay, I see I've held forth. I love seeing all of you here. Such beautiful faces. Kirsten, hi, I see you. It's really nice to see you. Yeah. Anne, great to see you. Beautiful. And up in my upper right corner is Elena Sensico, who is the editor of 10,000 Things and just a dear friend. So good to see you. All right, back to you, Sky. Turn off the mic.
Well, you mentioned Nisargadatta as I think in your book, in your discussion, you're critical of some of the ideas that he presents, but you give him credit for actually having some full experience of being. I hear you sort of saying that. Maybe I get that wrong. So how would you differentiate that from what you're doing here? Because in essence, your book is in words, it's a telling of stories. And so you have a full sense, let's see, of being awake. Let's use that word because it's less loaded and you've used it. You have a sense of being awake, and your book is telling stories about it. And so Nisargadatta was awake, and he was telling stories about it. And so probably as long as there are humans on this planet, which may be shortly or longly, there will be people that wake up and they'll be telling their stories. So how do we sort this out? I mean, how are your stories different from his?
Good question. That's a really great question. Look, we're all telling stories to ourselves constantly. That's clear, obvious. No one can deny that. But that doesn't mean, as a lot of people in spirituality keep trying to convince themselves, that any one story is as good as any other one story. That is not the case. Obviously not the case. To me, obvious to me. You may think that a Donald Trump story is equivalent to a Barack Obama story, but I don't. Okay. They're two different stories. I'm telling a story, and so did Nisargadatta. He was telling a story. But I think my story is better than his. And I'll tell you why. I could be completely wrong, and you can laugh at me. What? He's better than Nisargadatta? Next thing he'll be saying is just as good as the motherfucking Buddha. Well, I kind of am saying that, so let's cut to the chase. That's the idea here that we're trying to get at. Nisargadatta, I love Nisargadatta very much. So this is not a disrespect. I think he was a real cool cat and a brilliant cat. No question, no question. But he did not leave it open-ended. He thought there was this finish line and he had got to it. That story never rings true for me. When I look into my own experience of consciousness, that story does not ring true. I don't think I'm sitting here in some ultimate state, vaster than which there can be no other. I don't believe that. This is a beautiful thing we're doing here. It means everything to me right now, but I can't sit here and say this is the absolute. I don't know that. I never will, because the thing just keeps unfolding and flowing. There's no end to the flow, but I believe, and Nisargadatta, I guess, would not have agreed, that there is an end to Robert. Okay, so.
That's a major difference.
But people like, okay, to go into that a little further, because this is what the Batcap interview was about that sold the book to Tom Thompson. Hi, Tom. It's great to see you, man. You look beautiful too. All these bearded, fonts of wisdom, like a John Troy. And it's great. And I don't have the beard.
The beards are sure signs of enlightenment.
I thought they were signs of sexual virility, I guess.
Well, that too.
Oh, yes. These guys like Ramana Maharshi, whom I also respect tremendously. There's no question that this guy was on to something hugely important. I have no doubt of it. But they were trained in a certain very strict manner so that they have cognitive biases. We all have them. Theirs were in the direction of a God, although it wasn't called that in Vedanta, above all of this. And everything we're doing is just Leela. See, it's just nothing. That's a point of view. Actually, I can have that point of view myself. In fact, I like to go into that when I feel really ill and sick. I go, well, that's just Leela. Meanwhile, I'm not my body. See, we can do that. But is that really the ultimate? That's it? Dissociation is the ultimate psychological state? Or is being, without any idea of what it all means, another solution, which may be more effective and better in some way than dissociation, if you follow what I mean by that. Dissociation is when splitting. It's when I'm not the body. Oh, really? I could do some things that might convince you that you are the body. So you kick them in the shin after they go on and on babbling about that. That's the old Zen trick. Oh, really? Well, what do you say? So I think these Indian cats that influenced the Advaita community so deeply really confused a lot of us. The more Christian your background was, the more devout a Christian you were, and in rebellion against that, that's why you were looking to the East in the first place. The more you were ready to lap that up, because it gave you God without being a Christian, which is what you wanted to do. Well, I didn't want to do that. I was born into a Jewish family, but I thought God was bullshit when I was 8 years old, and I was right. And so I'm not saying there is no higher power, but the God that's presented to us human beings, bullshit. Come on. So I'm not in rebellion against religion. I never have been. I just see it for what it is. It's a total delusion. And it's perpetuated by this deep need that we have for our lives to be meaningful. And so all of these Westerners flocked to India to find meaning in this place where people are starving to death and they got the caste system and everyone's loaded down with all these superstitious beliefs. And they were primed by their Christian magical thinking. They were in rebellion against it. They go to India, oh yes, I'll touch your hand, drink your urine, whatever it is. Fuck, man, come on. So the 10,000 Things is really about, let's bring that to an end. Let's inhabit our human presences, feel our emotions, love one another, and not have to have this ultimate spirituality that we're seeking, but just be what we are right now. For me, that is good enough. That's my confession. That's what the 10,000 Things is all about. You may think I'm the village idiot. I might be. Rupert would probably say, yeah, this guy's the village idiot. Listen to him. He's only halfway there, but he thinks that's the ultimate. No, I'm always accused of that. It's backwards. That's backwards. I know I'm not the fucking ultimate. You're the one that's masturbating with ultimate, the absolute. I'm done with it. No interest. The only interest I have, and that's what the book is about, is this.
Well, I really appreciated you pointing to how we really don't know what is, and it's just unfolding for us.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think in your book you give some, in your writing you give some credence to science and empiricism as opposed to superstitious belief. And I've come to believe that instead of God in our sort of modern third world American culture, God has been replaced by science and the stories of science. And they're very similar. In the stories of science, we're just these little beings, and there's a larger reality that science is discovering. This is very similar to the dance of Leela and some Vedantic Hindu god. It's exactly the same pattern, only what we're buying is science. And if you look at the historical growth of science, what is true 50 years ago isn't true today. The way we viewed what an atom is 50 years ago, the story has completely changed. And so I think that again, science is a story, and it's our story. It's not the Vedantic story of God, but at some time in the future, 100 years from now, it'll be about as bizarre, our view of science will be about as bizarre to any humans that survive for 100 years as the Vedantic is to us right now.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Well, I understand that you have a story that is, this is all a story. I got that much. But I think what you just said misunderstands entirely what science is and what science does. It doesn't mean that there are not some scientists who are confused about their craft. But science is totally different from Vedanta. They're not in the same category even. And the difference is so stark. Here's the difference. Vedanta has the final answer. You learn it from your guru. In science, theories are presented and evidence is presented to back up those theories. If enough evidence is presented so that enough scientists say, this has some predictive power. This is beginning to show us the way the world works in a way that earlier science did not. The old theory is thrown out and the new theory is adopted. This is a human thing. The difference between that and Vedanta is that the scientists know that that is not the final answer. Science marches on. That's the whole idea. So Isaac Newton is not dissed, and you're not a heretic if you say Newton wasn't the ultimate. You're not a heretic if you say Einstein wasn't the ultimate. We march on. See, okay.
I would like to share something personal. It's also in my search. I've been to India 30 years ago and blah, blah, blah. But I'm 53 now. What I'm still confronting for me is every day, every hour, I create a problem. I create a fear. I create worry about money, about my spiritual life, about my, all the time. And this is not on for 24/7, but it's like, this is the hardest thing for me, which is still getting at me. I just want to share this.
I found in reading Robert's work that it's the anecdote of what you speak of, the frets or regrets or ideas and concepts they're trying to grasp and air are relieved from a mutual insight or aha that's really common sense. I describe Robert to people sometimes as a mountain of common sense in a sea of belief and superstition and mythologies and things. So the relief of all of that brings a quietness. Doesn't change it into any kind of other noise, but it brings a sense of peace when all of those ideas are relinquished without a replacement idea. And Robert's a little tough on yanking out the spiritual pacifiers that we may like to suck on. But they're just air castles. We build air castles and they dissipate like clouds, and that's all. But I find the best or an excellent medicine, I don't want to say best, but an excellent medicine is to ponder Robert's work.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. That's very funny, the air castles and all that. So true. So Wouter, I don't see you in your picture anymore. I hope you're hearing this, Wouter. I wanted to respond to you. You say that you create these problems every hour. And I don't really know what you mean when you say you create them. You sit there planning the next problem they're going to create, or how, there you are. Wouter, did you hear any of that? You're back. I wanted to address.
I'm sorry, I had a sanitary problem.
A cemetery problem?
A sanitary problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see what I've got in my mind constantly. No, hardly a Freudian slip. I mean, the cemetery is what awaits us all. Yes. And see, that's what actually lies behind my work. That's what I'm trying to get at, because the spirituality thing is a denial of that. They're trying to say that's just a blip, everything just goes on like it always has been. You're still be there, you know that how. Mm-hmm. So, but to address your question, you say I create these problems hour by hour. Was that what you were saying? Okay. I wonder what you mean by I create. Do you sit there trying, like a cartoonist, trying to imagine the next situation that will be problematical, or what? How do you?
yeah, also, I imagine all kinds of problems which will come to me, people, questions people will ask me, money problems which are not there, which will come for sure. All these things, how I will end up in the gutter sometime. All
Okay.
these,
So at what point in the day is this when you first open your eyes, you say, I need to create the first problem of the day? When do you decide to create a problem is what I'm asking. When does that happen?
yeah, that I don't know, because sometimes I get up very good. Sometimes I stand up with a lot of problems, like a lot of fears, a lot of worry. So I don't know where it comes from. Yeah, it comes from my, well, I'm trying to solve a lot. I'm doing an education, a kind of counseling thing. I do psychology. I read a lot, and I give workshops. And so there's so many things. I have a family, so but I make it an addiction.
Wouter,
Yes, please.
my question, I understand that. You're plagued by thoughts you would rather not entertain. Let's put it that way. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. My
Yeah.
question to you is, when in the day do you decide to wake up with a head full of those thoughts, or when do you do it before you go to sleep at night? Tomorrow I will wake up with a mind full of nagging doubts and fears. Or you decide, tomorrow morning when I awaken, I'll have a clear head, nothing, just be bliss. When do you just make that decision?
I'm not sure, because I go 5 minutes, I can be, really carefree. And then 5 minutes later, I'm worrying. Then for a few minutes, I'm headless, free. Then half an hour later, I'm worried to death. Then I am free again. Then I'm, and then I worry, and then I get a spiritual book or something, or Dostoevsky, I don't care, I care, but I get a good book, and read, and I'm happy. And then 10 minutes later, my daughter answers something or questions something, and I'm angry. And then that's all the time, these problems I create. There's fear of interaction, if I'm doing it right, and I constantly look for answers, how can I do it better? How can I be a better version of me? This is it. This is something like,
So, the way that I understand your situation, Wouter, and you've only spoken for a minute or two, so this is off the top of my head in a way. You experience a lot of anxiety. So, is that you're an anxious type of person? Possibly that's genetic.
yeah,
Possibly it's a combination of genetics and later experiences. But
yeah,
in any case, that's part of your flow. It involves anxiety. Yeah. Okay. The difference between your point of view on that and my point of view, because I have my own road to hoe, I can't say that I'm completely clean of doubts and fears. I mean, that'd be quite a claim. When I say quite a claim, what I mean is there's vast parts of our minds that we don't know anything about, and vast. And then there's other parts that we know a little bit about, but we push it under the rug as quick as we can. And then there's parts we know a little bit more about. So if I say I have no doubts and fears, that's what these gurus are. Now you can be that way too. Send in, it's ridiculous. I actually can't spoof this enough because it's so ridiculous to me. This is not when people hear me talk this way about spirituality, they kind of imagine that I'm being arch or ironic. I'm not. The thing is, it's absurd, all of it. Someone sitting on a stage and modeling perfect composure. So what? I mean, it'd be boring, so I won't do it. But if you needed me to, I could pull that one off easily. Come on. So we need to get beyond that. We need to get beyond that. Okay, so what I'm getting at here, Wouter, is that I don't see my anxiety as happening to me. I see that the anxiety is me. All that I call me is my sexuality, my anxiety, my hopes and dreams, every experience I ever had. Oh, it's all recorded in some place and can't be erased. There's this idea of tabula rasa that all these spirituality idiots are always saying, oh, that's nothing, you just wipe it out. Get rid of all the vasanas, is how that's said. You just work out your karma. Please. We are these brains that have countless stories, Sky, engraved into them from our ancestry passed down through DNA, so that John Troy is a Celt, and he really responds to that. And it's a mystery why. I mean, how do these things pass down through the generations? We have no idea. So you have your row to hoe, I have mine. I just see that the row is me. We call it my row to hoe as if we separated the worker from the work. But that's not the story. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, very nice. Very clear.
Thank you. So this is a question of ending, but by seeing that, it may happen that the desire for things to be different changes into the desire to fully experience all I have. I mentioned the cemetery. I mean, we only have a small window. If you feel anxiety, at least you're alive to feel it. So that's the bottom line, I think. Yes?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Robert, what I liked so much about your book was that you made choice, if I'm correct, a feeling, and it's not exact. I totally get that, but it's like working on me or something. And tell me if I'm wrong. That's what you kind of said. You're talking a lot about free will and choice, and it just made choice so much more understandable to me, and it kind of put it out there with the not put it out there, but it's the anxieties and feelings, and choice is I don't know. I'd like for you to say a little bit more about that, maybe, or maybe you said enough about it in the book. But all I want to say is that it's been very, very helpful.
Well, thank you so much for that, Alice. Yeah, choice is a feeling. It's not a power that we have. It's a feeling. When it arises, we respond to it. And if we are really honest, we can't really offer a rational justification for anything that we do. We can try, but as I was pointing out before, there's vast parts of our minds with which we are not acquainted at all. And this is a spectrum. There's parts of our minds that we're aware of slightly, but we need to push it under the rug. We need to. And we need to project it out into the world and hate it out there. And meanwhile, I'm okay. All of this strife, this Republican-Democrat strife, is these people projecting, not all of it, but a lot of it is these people projecting the unacceptable parts of themselves. To give an example, the Democrats say, oh, these racists, Trump's a racist, and so all these Republicans who like him are racist. Well, that's easy to say. It's a lot harder to look at one's own implicit assumptions. We don't. We avoid them. And that's what I'm talking about. So to imagine that there's this conscious decider, you have to ignore everything that psychologists know. And they don't know it because it's like Vedanta. Somebody said it to them and they went, oh yes, you're the guru. They know it because constant experiments are being devised to try to pin this down. And now that we have brain scanning, we can actually see these things occurring and how they occur. I don't want to give a talk here, but I'll give one example. If I hand you a card and the card has 2 words on it, banana and vomit, you will read that. You can't help reading it. As soon as the card is handed to you and it has letters on it, you read it. So there's no choice involved. Nobody decided to read that. It happened. Okay. If then half an hour later, someone walks up to you and begins to whisper in your ear, and the whispering will be right at the level of audibility, so that it's really hard to make out what's being said. The words that you will easily recognize are words that have anything to do with disgust, anything to do with pus, feces, vomiting, whatever. The reason is that you have been primed by this experience half an hour earlier that you did not choose, that you didn't remember, but there are vast parts of your brain that when they heard of food and vomit put together, created this entire structure of disgust, and it's still going around there while you think you're making a decision. This is not some speculation. That's the point here. These things can be tested and measured. And once, since you wanted to put science together with religion, it has nothing to do with it. Once an idea is raised, then it's tested. And if nobody can find any evidence for it, they say, this is a bullshit idea. Let's stop testing it. Wasting money. Test something that might be true.
So one of the things that makes us uniquely human, although it may not be unique because everything may be this way, is that we have the ability to reflect on our experience. In this example that you just made was, okay, we can observe that we're affected by previous events, affect the way we experience events that happen later, if you want to look in the context of time. So wouldn't that mean that Wouter may, if his mind is thinking, okay, I'm spending too much time with these fucking worries, wouldn't that maybe in the flow of experience mean that he could alter that whole flow of worries because he's learning about how things work?
That's the way it would look from the outside, but that's not what would be happening internally. That's what I'm saying, because internally, this is like an iceberg. 9/10 of it is subconscious entirely. See, the spirituality people don't like the subconscious. They try to take it out of existence, like they tried to tell John Troy that he's aware during deep sleep. And he said, man, I've had a lot of anesthesia by now. I'm telling you, it's not like that. And that's what I'm telling you. There's a vast part of your mind that you are not aware of, and you can't deny it. That one doesn't make it go away. And that is where the decisions are coming from. The decisions are based on advantage, sexuality, what you can consume, fear. These are we're being whipped constantly by the unconscious parts of our minds. And then, as Ellis was saying, thank you for that, by the way, these emerge as feelings. These are our feelings, and we call it a decision. We call it a decision. Did I really decide to marry Catania all these years ago? Was it, I sat there rationally figuring it out. Yes, well, she's pretty good at this, and, you know, it's great, sex is nice, and she cooks pretty well, and, you know, blah, blah, and weigh it all out. And I think, yes, I'll marry her. Of course not. When it comes to sexuality, we know we're being driven, and we kind of give into it. What a babe, you know, everybody. So see, this is we're being driven in our mentality in the same way. All this talk about consciousness and the mind and all that, it's mostly chit chat. It's covering up what John was talking about, John Troy was talking about earlier. He said, what I'm pointing at is when you understand that you're not going to know, then you relax.
So, Robert, can I just interrupt just to say hi, by the way, but also just to say in terms of what you're saying now, so if we can see a psychological pattern that we play out in our life, if that psychological pattern changes, it's simply because that's the way the cookie crumbles.
That's the question?
Yeah, that's what's happened. It's not that we've consciously been able to move through that into new behavior. It's just something that's happened.
I just want to say I love seeing you here.
No, I know. It's so exciting. It's awesome.
Your voice is great.
Thank you.
Really. So, I mean, I've admired your writing and all of that, so it's great to meet you. Okay. Well, so when I practiced psychotherapy, which I did for years, I gave people projects. Mm-hmm. And the idea was you will consciously try to work with anger or whatever it was in such and such a way and report back to me next week. Okay. It was like a prescription. Yeah. I'm not saying that's useless. That's not the idea. The idea is that since I can't make I have no way of enforcing that. Mm-hmm. If I give that suggestion to someone, they will either carry it out or they won't. Mm-hmm. That isn't a decision. Mm-hmm. Some people, if it's one kind of person and in one set of circumstances and I give them that prescription, they will go do it, you know, really do it. Another person will say, oh, Robert, you know, or another person will just need to be pissed off, so they can't do that. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Yeah.
Does that, I'm not sure if I really cut to the heart of your question with that.
No, I think that does make sense. I think that does make sense. I think what you're saying also is that understanding that free will doesn't exist doesn't mean, sorry, that's my phone, doesn't mean that we don't take responsibility for ourselves. It's not a reason to be able to go and do whatever we want.
If you feel the need to be responsible for your behavior, by all mm-hmm. means, please be responsible for it. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at that. I really mean that. Mm-hmm. I say the same thing to anyone. If mm-hmm. you ever find yourself behaving in a way that doesn't seem right, and you think you can exert some control, please do. That's one. Mm-hmm. Please do. So I won't get into the more esoteric question about whether that's possible or not. It's enough that you have the feeling and, mm-hmm. Act on it. If mm-hmm. there should come a time in life or in the flow when you do not need to ride herd on yourself, and you couldn't, mm-hmm. Even if you wanted to, mm-hmm. then the question disappears. Not because this is what the 10,000 things is about. The question can never be answered. Is there free will or there isn't? You see, by making that into a question and taking sides, that's the avoidance of the issue. then that maintains the fiction that these things really can be known. Maybe I can't know it now, but there either is free will or there isn't. It's a binary choice, and I'll find out, or the guru already knows, and I'll go for instruction. I don't know if I don't know what free will is. I don't know if it really exists or it doesn't. I don't know that in some absolute sense. I don't know if that question is germane. I don't know if there is such a question, except in fantasy. What I'm saying is I'm not in that place. I never think about free will. I have no need. I don't consider it. As in terms of what Ellis was saying, act on my feelings. What choice do I have? We're all acting on our feelings, except a lot of us are in denial. We've got this justification. Yes, we got the justification trap. It's like you got that. That was my original, what you call, awakening. I'm just an ordinary person. See, I was a photographer and I'm working and I'm doing my thing. And I remember when it happened, I was just sitting there in my truck, actually out on the mesa, contemplating to the distance that Richard knows about New Mexico, how that can happen. It's so vast that you just disappear, you know. It's so easy to meditate there in that sense, very easy. So I'm just sitting there, and suddenly I felt all of this is just happening. Nobody's doing it. There is no Robert. I'm not seeing anything. All of this is just here, including any thoughts I have about myself. And it was really shocking. And I kind of thought it would pass, but it didn't. It didn't pass. And after a few days, I had to kind of start to come to terms with that. And then I eventually worked it out pretty well. And I just kept quiet about it all these years because many reasons. I'm going to be honest with all of you because you've read my book and you like me. I thought that I might go on a big ego trip if I spoke about this and become like one of these people I now criticize. So that potential was there because I have a certain charm and it would be easy to sell that story. See, yeah. Well, I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to school and be a psychotherapist. And I'll use this understanding, but I won't talk about it. I'll be a non-dual psychotherapist. Okay, and that was my idea. And it worked great. But the original fear of confessing, as I did in the 10,000 Things, was that I'll go on an ego trip, people will like what I'm saying, and then I'll become a flavor of the month kind of thing. And even though here I am again doing most of the talking, as if I were some guru sitting on a stage, I hope that that's not the feeling, because I'm actually speaking from ignorance. I have training in psychology and I've thought deeply about what myself is. So I have some background, but I don't actually know. I don't actually know. And I don't think that I'm ever going to know in this life the answers to all these questions that we all have. And so for me, once I realized that I'm not going to know, I felt this tremendous relaxation come over me. It's hard to describe what a good place that is. John Troy was describing it earlier, and I see that he's in that place. And he's just sitting there, and he's in pain because he just had a shoulder replacement and everything, but he's just cool. And we're hurting ourselves by overvaluing the conscious intellect and undervaluing all the rest of what lies behind this, which is terra incognita entirely.
Yeah.
Nobody knows anything about it. Nothing.
Yeah.
Freud had his theories. Jung had. They don't know.
Well, this was one of the best things about reading your book for the third time when I was on holiday recently, was the chapter where you said Adler said the primary force was the will to power, Freud the will to pleasure, and you were talking about Viktor Frankl and the desire for meaning, and saying that Joseph Campbell had said, I think what we're all seeking is actually the rapture of being alive. And that for me really hit me this time, because I've spent a lot of my life reading these great men and women and thinking about their thoughts as though they were some kind of truth rather than just aspects of themselves. And that release from that authority is wonderful for me. So really, thank you for that. It's just one more thing that I've got from your book. Yeah. You've got mute on, Robert.
I did know that. I just feel like I've been talking so much. It was great to be muted.
Mm. Yeah.
I was going to tell you, Robert, I obviously read your book, and I was going to ask some questions about it or bring some stuff up, and I realized I don't have any questions, and I don't remember anything about it hardly. I don't know why that is. It's just like, I just know that I really freaking like this book when I read it. And when you talk, it's like, I like this guy. There's something about it. You said earlier, because you're talking about you from this authentic place, like Boucher was earlier. He's just being honest, and he's saying, I'm feeling this. I resonate with transparency, honesty. And I think in some levels, I've been really fortunate. This mind doesn't have this desire to understand all these complex terms. And when people start talking about Advaita and all this complicated language, I tend to just, there's no draw there. There's no real interest. I just resonate with authenticity. And I teach 5th grade. And so when I'm around almost every one of my students, there's a sense of just freaking love, and like a sense of joy that happens, and without all this rigorous sort of let's fight to understand all this stuff. And I'm not saying that's the right path, but I feel like I'm really fortunate to have this childlike perspective on things that it just doesn't matter to me. I really don't give a fuck about so much of it. I just want to laugh and hang out with cool people. So anyway, it's good to see you, man. I got my hair back. I was going to try and grow it like yours, but I'm too bald on the top.
Thanks so much, Matthew. Yeah, when I retired, I stopped. I used to have a very straight appearance when I was doing psychotherapy. I wanted to have a more neutral aspect to offer to the world, but just letting it go now. Just another old guy. Okay, the honesty. I see Robert's honesty objectively, quite objectively, and that began when I realized that I was always talking to myself, and that whatever I said, the primary consumer of that was me. And that is why it's really important not to tell yourself a bunch of shit. Now, I want to go into this a little bit more on the psychology aspect of it, which seems to be my theme today. In the 10,000 Things, I mentioned confirmation bias a few times. Confirmation bias means that we tend to collect information and value it if it tends to support our pre-existing beliefs. And information that tends to cast our pre-existing beliefs into doubt, we either undervalue it or we don't notice it at all, we forget it. Okay, well, that confirmation bias is just one example of a cognitive bias. We're actually filled with cognitive biases. We all are. And one of those biases I want to tell you about now, and that is the more often something is said, the easier it is to believe it. Has been studied and proven hundreds of times, robust studies. Really careful studies have shown this to be true of the human mind. This is regardless of whether what you're hearing is true or not. Regardless of whether of the truth or falsity. The more often it's mentioned, the easier it is to believe it. Self-honesty. This is why self-honesty is vital. It's so urgent. And this is what I realized when I awakened, that everything I said was being said to me, regardless of who the rest of the audience might be. And you hear that, and your unconscious mind hears it, and it can't tell if it's a lie or not. It records everything it hears. And so if we're going to have any shot at this at all, of actually being, what I call actually being, honesty is where you have to begin, self-honesty. Then there's a chance that some of your thinking about these matters might have something to do with reality or with being. But if you are constantly lying to others, those lies will become your truth. And in my critique of spirituality, that is what I'm getting at. When you have someone, we are very averse to punishment and very open to reward. So if I'm some California guru who's actually just parroting what these 20th century geniuses were talking about, and the audience loves that, and they're giving me money, and women want to sleep with me and all the rest of this, I'm going to keep telling myself that story. And pretty soon I will totally believe that story. Whether I started out with the chance of doubting it or not is another question. That is what has happened to these people that are so famous and that everyone is listening to as if this is the font of wisdom. It isn't. It just isn't. And if we understand cognitive bias and the unconscious, and if we really look at ourselves honestly, we'll see that we're not in control of all this. I'm not. That's why I'm very naked and open, because I'm not responsible for the. If I like here, I feel I'm holding the floor too long. That's my honest inner feeling. Some of you may agree, some of you may disagree. But I feel a bit embarrassed now. And that's what I mean by honesty. By telling myself that, now, okay, I'm going to shut off the fucking mic.
Robert, I do have something that sort of stuck in my crow from the last meeting, whenever we had it. You said, I can tell when people are awake and when they're not awake. And I thought, what the heck is he saying there? And I got sort of pissed off when I heard that. So, and I feel really nervous saying this right now. But so it just seems so presumptuous. That's all.
Oh. Okay, so you feel nervous because I'm the authority and you have this feeling. Yeah, well,
sure.
See, that's...
Yeah, I mean, I feel nervous because I'm speaking out, but when I heard that, I didn't feel nervous or that mad or angry or anything. I just went, no, wait a minute. It just seems, how could he know someone else's experience of being awake? So,
I can see it on your face and in your eyes when I meet you. I can see what's going on. I can see.
That seems so guru-like, you know. It does seem a little guru-like to me.
Okay, well, I'm not attributing any special powers to myself that others don't have. What I am saying is that because of this awakening, I wake up every morning intact without anything to solve. And because I'm not running my brain on these questions to solve, it's very easy for me to see the world around me. I have a very clear space. But I'm not saying that's because I'm this magical human that comes along once in every 5 years or 1,000 years. That's not what I'm saying. This is a human capacity. With them. It's just ordinary. If we don't, it's because our minds are elsewhere. This isn't magical. We evolved in a social primate universe where you had to know if the other guy wanted to kill you or share food with you. You had to know that. These are very deeply rooted perceptions. We don't have to try to create them. They go wrong because we're living in a world that's not honest. So it's easy to become confused. If I was saying this before, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say, Robert.
If I wanted to feign, hi. Oh, you want to talk, Elena? Please do.
Yes. Yes. I just want to say something that I think fits here very well. Part of what really attracted me to work with you on the book was precisely that just being with you, I see clearly somebody who accepts openly and just presents himself as an ordinary being. And that sort of gives me permission, you know, to just be an ordinary human being as well. It's like this open space to just simply be. And I'm very deeply thankful for that. I've never, and we've met so many times, I've never seen in you disapproval. I've never seen in you nothing but openness and acceptance, and just with all my ordinariness or whatever you say it, but you present it first. You are the embodiment of that, just ordinary, and that's beautiful. Such a gift.
Wow. Thank you, Elena. I love you too.
That really wasn't my question.
Well, you don't know me as well as Elena does, so your question.
Exactly. No, I don't think it was my. Do you get my question? Okay.
I get it. I'll try to answer. I tried to answer it.
I don't know. Is it answerable?
No. It goes into this area of this is a problem with what I'm calling awakening. It goes into this area where and Richard Elkin got into this last week in a really good way, which I appreciated, Richard. That's gone around and around many times. What he said, he was a Zen person for many years. And what he said was that to say I'm awake and I know it is a total no-no in that tradition. No one would ever. So there's a taboo, and I have violated the taboo. I'm talking openly about human awakeness, not this kind of spiritual enlightenment that's just an imaginary state.
But that's not what no, Robert, wait a sec. That's not what I asked. You said you could tell whether somebody else was awake.
Yes, and I'm answering you, Alice, as best I can. You may not like the.
I like that you're awake. I like that you describe how you're awake. Your book, I loved your book.
Yes,
but when you say that you can tell whether I'm awake or not,
yes.
that I I can't agree with, I guess.
Okay, well, you don't have to agree or disagree. You can just hear that that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be judged. What I'm saying is not that I can infallibly label everyone I meet as either into two different categories. That's not what I said. What I'm saying is something different. Part of what just let me finish this one, John. Part of what it feels like to me to be awake is that I can recognize pretty easily in a crowd even who is in this state of, and who has a furrowed brow, either visually or metaphorically. It's pretty easy. It's what awake is what awake. Oh, John, you were going to say something. Forgive me.
Yes. When I first met Robert in Catania, I picked him up at the Raleigh-Durham airport. And upon emerging from the escalator and our eyes meeting, there was a seamless recognition that wasn't personality or personal within Robert's form. It was seamless and very peaceful in a way. And when Robert walked up to me, he expressed that and affirmed that with me in our mutual recognition. But it wasn't personality related. It included all those people in the airport and everything around it, the structures and the escalator and everything. Everything was illumined beautifully in our meeting, and that's never changed. We have a really, really wonderful friendship. I have great respect for it. But that mutual recognition of what one might call awakeness, I don't know if we can call it anything, but that mutual recognition is true. It is true.
I have a, am I being heard?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question about the value of things inside of practices, inside of, you know, Buddha as a scientist, that if we're all wrapped up in these stories, there are ways to dismantle those. There are ways and practices to take ourselves up, you know, metaphorically up to that mesa where Robert was, to have this experience and experiences like that. And it's like when I take on the four noble acts, kind of as Stephen Batchelor calls them, not truths, and train myself to start to see that happening versus the capitalist structure or whatever that I've usually got rolling in my head. That helps me dismantle these things and create openings. It's literally a training or a practice, like you would have to learn how to run distance, and pretty soon you run distance if you run long enough, and you can do it. So where does other practices that you have done or can recommend, or along those lines?
I never saw a picture of who was speaking. Who was that?
Ralph Cheney.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm up at the.
I see. I see. You're being shot out of a cannon.
Yes.
That's what I see. Okay. So what practices would I recommend? I think I touched on it a little earlier. Self-honesty about what you know and don't know. Not a striving to change, but an honest recognition of oneself in this moment. All your feelings, your desires, your fears, your essence, your being. We have to, sooner or later, we must come to this. We must. So the practices will be an avoidance. It may be necessary to take the long way around by having a practice, but that's not the direct way. But I'm not saying no one needs it. I've never said that. If meditation is the practice. Okay, that's the one. We all agree on that, I think. I don't know if we all agree on it, but that's what I say. Meditation is the practice. If you need a practice, then do that one. But understand that you don't have to do that practice. You could awaken right now if you simply understand that there is no alternative to this. There never is. There never was. There never will be. And you see, I say this, to me it's clear. It's clear as a mountain stream. And that's what John Troy likes to say. It's as innocent as a babbling brook. What he said about me, I babble. I love that, John. You're as innocent as a babbling brook, he says to me. That's all you have to do is be. That's all you have to do. It's all you can do. There's this idea of attaining this more comfortable, commodious mind space, self-imagination. In this new imagination, I'm spiritually awakened, so it's much easier to take a shit or whatever. See, it isn't. And that's you just have to deal with this, whatever this is. You may be in great pain. Some of us that probably in this group have experienced quite a bit of physical pain, I would wager. And yet in those moments, you can actually be. People have done it. That's meditation. Meditation is simply, Elaine is a teacher of Vipassana meditation. She's a wonderful teacher of it. Wonderful. The best. And what makes her so good is that she's honest about her motives. She's not doing it to become enlightened or to get to the end of the yellow brick road, the Eightfold Noble Path and all this. That's not why she does it. That isn't it. And so it has credibility. She has a motive that for me has credibility, which is to be with oneself. So that's the practice. Whatever you have to do, if you have to take the long way around and purify yourself for 28 years or whatever, stare at a brick wall, whatever you have to do, okay. But sooner or later, there's going to be this moment of recognition. That's what it's like. It's not a gradual thing. It's just, you see, there's no alternative. All of that is just fantasy. Everything that's not this in this moment is pure fantasy, doesn't exist. That girl I want to be with, she's not here. So I can have that fantasy and that'll be what's taking up my attention. Or I could look around the room and maybe see who's awake in the room. So that's, the girl was cute though. I might, indulge in that for a while.
Imagination.
I won't be more explicit, but that's what it comes down to, really.
I think the one binding factor in what Wooter said, what Ralph said, and even what Elena said, is if you're in the present moment right now, you're awake. If you're not, and you're thinking of the past or the future, you're just not. And it's easy to see because when you meet somebody, like what Wooter was saying, he lets things flow. He knows he's causing them, but he's enjoying without realizing the tension he's creating for himself because it's drama-rama. That's what village idiots do. That's what we do as village idiots. We create drama where there really isn't any. And we're the one creating the drama. I know that that's what I did. And Robert's claim to be able to see somebody awake is not some spiritual mumbo jumbo crap. It's just seeing if the person's centered in the present moment or not. In treating a lot of patients, as Robert has, most of the patients can be judged by how far out of the now they are, you know? And that's the same way in someone being awake. If someone is able to be spontaneous in the present moment this week, then they're awake. And they said that I was the devil. And so I already saw the holes in the writing many years ago out of now. But that to me is the whole thing. Robert is great. And I love the book, and I think it's a complex book, you know, because it takes a lot of different ideas now and puts them in the present moment. You see, I'm really basic. I'm not smart like Robert or like John. I just look at things simply. I'm either in the present moment or I'm not.
Well, we're all in the present moment all the time, and I think that's what Robert's saying, that even the fantasy of last week or tomorrow is now.
That's correct.
That
and that's not just what Robert's saying.
You can't be out of the present moment.
Yes, you can.
No.
Yes, you can.
No.
Mentally,
No, because all there is that present moment.
You know what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. You can't be out of the present moment. You're physically always in the present moment, but mentally the mind divides the present moment just because.
But when is that division happening? It's happening. It's happening right now.
Whoa! I'm going to intervene here. I want to stage an intervention because I've seen this one happen. This particular debate is endless. I want to bring it to an end, and it's easily brought to an end. You could bring it to an end in your own mind and never really think about it again. The answer depends on what you mean by me, or I, or myself. It's that simple. So instead of arguing about whether you're always in the present or you're not, which won't ever lead anywhere useful, the question is, who is this I who is either in the moment or isn't, or is always in the moment? So if there's an I who's always in the moment, like you say, Sequoia,
there's no I here. The present moment is always happening. Like you say, there's no alternative.
I thought we did this last week. I think you misunderstood. No? Well, I thought so, but maybe I didn't get it cooked. I think you are misunderstanding something that I am saying. I think you're misunderstanding something I'm saying. And it's not helpful to be absolute.
I just know my own experience. That's all. I'm not absolute for anybody else, but I know what this experience is, what's going on for this experience.
So in your experience, there's no myself, except you have an experience. So the question is, who's having that experience?
I don't know. The only thing I can say about it is that there's awakeness going on. There's aware going on. I can't locate an I. There's no concreteness to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went into this last week. And what I told you was, I can easily locate an I almost all the time, actually all the time, if I care to. But I just don't know what that is And unlike the spirituality teachers, I am not saying that that I is endless, fixed, unchanging, has anything to do with God. I'm not saying that. But,
Yeah.
but I do experience an I. I
Yeah,
have.
and I don't.
Okay.
I
Must,
yeah.
must be lovely. Very good.
Well, it's neither good nor bad. It just is.
Okay. And what David is saying is valid from his point of view. He came to understand, I think a few years ago. I kind of watched this happen online. If I have this correct, David, I may be a bit fuzzy. I think it was after you read John Troy's book, yes?
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that? What happened?
Well, I'll say that what basically happened was I came to a point where I've been full circle. I've been in AA for about 27 years, no, 24 at that time. And what basically happened was that I had an inkling of certain things, you know, touching the presence within myself after doing a lot of work. But when I read John Choi's book, it just said 3 words. Now is actually 4. Now is the self. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went on in my head. And then I literally started to think about that. And I couldn't get around the presence of the present moment. And then I met Robert through John, and Robert beat me up a little bit on some, things that I had, as he talked about before, had just, conscious implants and unconscious implants in my head. I mean, I remember when he told me that Mother Teresa was really just, a self-seeking bitch. And, I had to really do some research and actually find out that, that was actually true. She just wanted to help people with an ulterior motive of conditioning and not unconditional love. And so as I kind of moved around, but it was really John Troy's book that motivated me. And a lot of people think that I would, or thought that I was an Eckhart Tolle person. And, I know that Eckhart comes to my area and stuff like that, and I'm neither here nor there about him, but I read his book. But it was really John slapping me with now is the self. And then it all made sense to me. It's kind of like, oh, okay, the self is now. And then my people and friends, my wife, they're all into higher powers and stuff like that. And I go, okay, my higher power is right now. And it's the present moment. It's the presence inside me. It's what's alive within. And that's really how it kind of happened. Robert did a gentle slapping around periodically when I would get myself out of the present moment. And when I say that, I mean, it was little things. And then Robert also did steer me to reading a couple of books. One of them was Beelzebub's Tales. And he said, read it carefully and kind of intimated something. And I read it, and it's a kind of a long book. And, when I met both John and Robert, I was also used my intuition to feel Jamsey in Robert, and I used my intuition to feel Walter Chappelle in Robert. And then, of course, being the geek that I am, I researched what I could of Walter Chappelle, and even went to go see some of his works that are locally exhibited in town, and then looked at his work in Carillion photography and some other things. So what I'm saying is when John put me into the present moment and my own presence, it opened up more wonder, more expectation. And even though I'm older, at least biologically, I basically enjoy learning new things in the present moment. That's pretty much it. And I agree with Robert wholeheartedly. Now is it. And it's when I say, again, it's not just talking about the word now. I get that. It's basically the presence. It's our aliveness. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. And it also means too, what I always felt from Robert and from John was I can call John anytime. I can talk to Robert anytime. There was never any barrier or anything like that. It was always spontaneous, you know. And to me, that's, you know, Sequoia, that's really the whole thing, is it's just being nakedly spontaneous and I think loving. You used the word earlier, Robert. I think love is important. When I mean the word love, I'm talking compassion, mutual respect, a real zest for your own presence and being comfortable in yourself. And I think I think it was Wooten that asked, Wouter that asked earlier, you know, all those questions, it's, you know, being comfortable with your own flow, you know. And that's pretty much it. I'll shut up now.
Well, the thing that comes up for me is that I don't have any spiritual history in terms of I've read nothing virtually, and all I can know for certain is this experience right now, and that changes from moment to moment. It's always new, and that's about all that can be said about it. And so I don't think we're saying different things or anything, but it's not based, this experience isn't based on what I've garnered from other teachers, because there have been none.
Well, when you say other teachers, does that mean you're a teacher?
No. No, I'm no teacher. No, it's
I'm not either, Sequoia.
yeah, no, yeah, I'm just saying from anybody else. I mean, I can, the only thing I know is real is what's happening right now.
Okay, well, I intervened before. I intervened earlier because I get it. You have this experience and it means something to you. And that's what we all have. And what David was saying is, for him, it doesn't matter what happened 1 second ago or 1 second in the future. He's come to a point of understanding now. He understands it. So that's his focus. It's not a matter of agreement or disagreement. There's not a correct position about whether everything is always now or the future and the past exists. There's not an answer to questions like that. That's what we are.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is a past and a future. If there weren't, we couldn't talk about it. How imaginary it is or what it all means is what we don't know. But it's clear that to me, it's clear that there's a past. I'm not like one of these Christians who thinks that the Colosseum was built 9 years ago and it's just a movie set or something, you know, to test your faith or something. It's not like that. There is a past. Of course there is. And we all have one and we're influenced by it. And to see when people try to deny that, they're lying. And that's what I was getting at before. Awake means you tell yourself the truth. That's what awakeness is, even if it doesn't do you any honor, even if you feel like a complete burnout when you say it to yourself. If it's true in this moment, you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and
that, see what I just want to put a stop to this, Sequoia. Not that there's nothing wrong with what you're saying, but there's nothing wrong with what David is saying. It's two different approaches to myself. It's two different understandings of what myself is. For you, it's an emptiness. And for David, it's a fullness. It's filled with the feelings and events of this moment. And they're both wrong. And they're both right. They're both right, from depending on your point of view. So
it's not, I just don't see it based on a point of view, and it's just experience. What's
Okay.
coming up is all.
Yeah, well, I thought we got into this last week, Sequoia. I know we did, in fact, but I couldn't convince you then, and I don't think I will now.
You know what?
So I just want to move on. Let me move on here, David, because I want to say hello to Gonzalo. Thank you so much for being here. I see you. Costa Rica? I think he's in Costa Rica.
Yes, Robert, thank you
So
very much.
I have to say, and I want to say hello to the other people like Donna. I see you. Your camera's not on. Paul Cannell, nice to see you here. Great. Sage One, we talked before. Let's see where. Oh, Angie, nice to see you again. I thought of our conversation last week. It's very good. Harm, you're here. Good to see you. Let's see who else. Wouter, we spoke. Joseph Debris. I don't know who that is. I'd like to.
That's me, Robert. I'm using my Irish name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit dark here. That's Joe Bray.
Oh, I get it. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, I'm just, I use my Irish name as well, you know, so that's what it is with this link. So that's what it is.
Now that Brexit happened and everything, that's going to probably mean a lot more.
Yeah, well, I've got an Irish passport, so I'm okay.
Oh, great. Good for you, man. And
Yeah.
that does that mean you guys get to stay in the European Union and the Brits don't?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I got my children Irish passports as well. So even though we all live in England, we're all Irish citizens. Apart from my wife, unfortunately, she's still British.
Yeah.
So.
I
But
like
if
that.
it's too hot, we can bail out, you know.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a dual citizen myself. I'm a Mexican citizen and a U.S. citizen. It's really great. The Mexican, especially now that Trump is president, the Mexican passport's starting to look pretty buff.
Yeah.
That asshole. He called these countries shitholes. He's a fucking shithole. God. Unbelievable that they let the guy walk around loose. Can it get any worse? Probably. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, Paul, you and I had a private message, and there was this thing you wanted to bring up, and it seemed interesting. You want to bring that up?
Well, I'm just hoping my microphone works. Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I guess it ties in nicely with self-honesty, what we were talking about. So I'm not sure if it's been covered already, but I think the main guts of what we ended talking about was how you'd said that radical doubt is a major theme of your book, and you suggested remaining with that until one is completely satisfied. So I understand the analogy of the sculpture being chipped away to expose the ordinary person. I guess I'd like to ask you if you go into that part that says until one is completely satisfied, and what that.
You broke up a little there at the end, but
I'll try again. That the last part was where you'd said that with radical self-honesty is the major theme of your book, and suggested remaining with that until one is completely satisfied. And I just think, yes, I understand the analogy of the sculpture chipping away, which I've been doing for many years and quite quietly and going through. And I just want to comment on that last about what your view on that was there, kindly. Thank you.
okay, well, so there's not really a question. I guess it was cleared up. Well, that's the idea, radical self-honesty about what one knows and doesn't know, and what one feels and does not feel. is the entire basis for coming to a self-understanding. And that's sanity. And actually, this is kind of strange to say, I guess, but I think if you're sane, you don't need to be awake. It's not an issue. I think it's when you're feeling unbalanced that you want to be awake, as if that was this great thing. It isn't. It's not what people think. It doesn't solve any problems. You still have to be you, and you always will. And you see, that's what they don't like. They want to. This goes back. I think it was last year, or I posted this Zapfi, the Norwegian philosopher Zapfi. Did you pick up on that, Paul? You were one of the people who did, right?
I did, yeah. Peter Vessel Zapfer, and you talked about the sublimation, having something creative that can balance the pressures of ordinary living. But he was quite interesting. Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, he was saying that we have a brain problem, we human mammals, in that we are aware enough to know about our own demise, which most of the other animals don't seem to be, but we're not gifted enough intellectually to come to any real understanding of it. So we're thrown into a kind of vicious cycle, and the way people deal with it is through escapism, of not wanting to be human. They invent this other thing which is not human, it's not what we really are, and attempt to attain that, because this situation that I'm in, according to Zapfi, is this. I understand the signs of old age. I've seen them in others, and soon they weren't around anymore. And so I have the idea that that's probably soon on the agenda for this old boy, sooner or later. So I can be in denial, or I can say, I don't really have the intellectual capability to understand that, and neither did Nisargadatta. No one did, not the Buddha either. Can't understand that. So what makes these people cool? What is there about their approach that is useful? And that's really what I asked myself, because I didn't become aware of those guys until after my own awakening. I wasn't interested in Vedanta. I didn't have much use for it. I was into Zen, and Middle Ages Buddhism was my preferred hangout. So when I discovered these people later, Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta, I saw that they were saying something pretty cool, but that they were being taken as truth. And that destroyed it. That just destroyed it. And what they really did, these people, was they asked themselves very serious, deep questions, and they kept at it until they got an answer. I'm not saying their answers were right, and I think they overestimated the facticity of their answers. That's my opinion. I think they thought they were a bit cooler than they really were, but they were cool. And we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And so what I say is, you have to satisfy yourself. That's who has to be satisfied. Not that some other human has to think you're awake or you're cool, but that you feel that you are awake, whatever it takes. And I think, to get at what Richard was talking about last week, in that first meeting, someone said it showed courage for me to say I am awake. And I pondered that for a long time, because I didn't feel courageous, and I never felt that it required any courage for me to do that. It just flowed out. But I understand now what was meant by that, in the sense that you're kind of setting yourself up for all these projections. And those projections don't actually have anything to do with me. They only have to do with what people think awake is. Robert's got it, or else Robert's just pretending he's got it, or it's deluded, or Robert is this, and Robert is that. And it's just all projection. So I don't see myself that way.
But you said something else too. But you also said not only were you awake, but you also said the last meeting that relatively everybody that was here was also somewhat awake as well too.
I think that everyone at this meeting is really awake.
I agree.
But some of us don't really know it. And so the question is, for me, it's like this. I've got this thing I would like to show it. And I think everybody also has it, but you don't notice it. I don't mean you. I'm not speaking personally to anyone. I'm sure some of you have noticed it as much as I have. That's not my point. My point is we're all really awake, but something stops us from fully inhabiting that, what Sequoia was calling experience. And what is that? And what I'm saying it is, to me, is very simple. You have deified some previous awake person. So you have framed awake as something unattainable. You've set up this impossible scenario right from the beginning. This is what happened to the Christian message. I'm not anti-Christian, I'm just anti-dogma. I think that probably this cat named Jesus actually lived, and he was probably a pretty cool dude. I really think so. Maybe even a great yogi, for all I know. Could have been. That's not no worries there. And I think probably this guy was talking like I'm talking, in his way, talking about what he's talking about. I don't feel distant from that inwardly. But they deified this guy. And so now you can only be Christ-like. You can't actually be Christ. See, and so once it's framed that way, you're dead. You're defeated right from the beginning. If you think the Buddha was awake, and it's going to take me 11,000 lifetimes, I have to gain merit, and my ass will be tired from all that sitting I have ahead of me and all the rest of it. If you really think that, you framed it wrong. And what I'm trying to do, and it didn't take courage, but now that it's out there, the book's been published, people like it, I'm being given this kind of mantle of authority. Then what I'm trying to say is, stop deifying anybody or anything, any idea, any person, any procedure. Just understand it's just all human doings. And then then you will see that you are awake. You wake up in the morning and the world appears. How much more awake can you be than that? Here I am, here's the world, and we're off to the races. I mean, that's what I mean by awake. It's just that I really know it.
Well, the thing too is, right, that I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I was projecting anything to you, because I spent a lot of time through the last 20, 30 something years, or born with the background of indoctrination. So just seeing that has been enough for me. But I wouldn't be sitting here and having corresponded with everyone here on Facebook and yourself. And I don't feel that I project on anything onto you at all. I'm very interested in what you have to say, and that's enough. I don't feel I am projecting, which is really great for me. And I feel like this is a very ordinary meeting and listening to everyone, and it all seems very natural for me. And it's quite simple. So that's a nice feeling to have. To not, it's like having smashed all those imageries around me. You know, it's a nice place to be. So.
Yeah, I wasn't. My remark wasn't directed at you at all, Paul. I was responding to David. Last week, I'd gotten into this little rant about how everybody's really awake, and but not everyone knows it. And I'd said there were about like 20 people in the group, and I'd said everyone here, I'm sure, is really awake. And some of us know it and some of us don't. David was asking me about what I meant by that. And I mean that for me, awake is when you put nothing above you. Nothing.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. That's why people avoid it.
Yeah.
That means there's no one telling you what to do. And that's really hard for most humans. We're very dog-like. We want a leader of the pack. You can see it among the gorillas. They're our nearest genetic neighbor. We want a teacher. We want a guru. We want somebody to imitate. I'm not saying it. I don't mean the present company. I mean, this is why what I'm trying to say is this is why awakeness has taken on this exaggerated importance as if it was something that had to be attained through effort or through knowledge. That's why, because we've deified the people, and a lot of them made a living out of being deified, and they encouraged it. And that's the world we're in.
Robert, it's Beth Richards. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Beth.
Okay, great. I don't think you can see me though, right?
No.
Okay, last time you could see me, but anyway, that's okay. I wanted to ask about, first of all, it's great to meet everyone here and to see faces. And I just wanted to ask about radical self-honesty and intuition. You were saying to me before that, you were saying to all of us that we have to apply radical self-honesty, but you were also saying earlier that most of what we do and think, or most of what we think, most of what comes up is just all conditioned and unconscious, and one pull one way or another, and that we can't trust our intuition. You'd said that earlier. And so how do you know you're being radically self-honest? How do you know? And can you be radically self-honest one moment and then radically self-honest the next day, and it's a really different conclusion? I'm kind of assuming that's possible. And also, in terms of intuition, I find when I'm reading, because I've met a lot of new friends because of meeting you and reading 4TT, or 10,000 Things, I always call it 4TT. I've met a lot of new people, and I've gone to their sites and their web pages, and they have a lot of like there's so many words to describe what's supposed to be wordless. And after a while, the words just start spinning in my head, and I use my intuition, at least that's what I think I'm using, to feel what's real, to feel what's honest. Because a lot of it just seems like a lot of spinning words. So I wanted you to comment on that, and also there's something else, but my mind is just going blank. So if you can just reply to that, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me try. I think my mic's on. Yes. Hi, Beth. Nice to not see you. Oh, you've attained the void.
Great. Thanks. Okay, well, I'll go now then. Bye.
Yeah, well, the point is that you don't know, and really nobody knows anything. And that's what really has to be seen, and we don't like that. We avoid that. So we want intuition to be a guide, because that's better than not having a guide. But the truth is you don't have a guide. There is no separate guide watching all this. And it's intuition. Like when you're the dog on the leash and intuition is the collar. It's not like that. It's not like that. It just isn't like that. I don't want to use this overused word. The initials are ND, but if you see that ND means oneness, you can't separate yourself from what you feel and think and pull that into line. Just that's not happening. It's just not happening. And that, I know that's hard to see because we've been trained from childhood not to notice that. Been trained, carefully trained. That's what enculturation involves. Radical self-honesty is the best you can do. It's not going to be perfect. My self-honesty is going to be diluted by my cognitive biases that are unknown to me. We have to see this. This is not some kind of radical theory. This is the way the mind works, the human mind. There are all these theories about mind. Oh, mind is universal intelligence and all this jazz. And that's fine. Those are metaphysical ideas. But when we actually see how my human mind works, when that's studied, and there are a lot of ways of studying it, we become aware of our great ignorance. It's not intentional. That's just the way that the human being is set up. I think this is clear if you look at it. There's a vast amount of experience, feelings and everything that I don't know anything about, but they travel around with me. They're associated with me. They're engraved in my body and my brain.
So when you say radical self-honesty, then you're just saying acknowledging all of that.
Well, you can't acknowledge it because you don't know about it. But that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is part of radical self-honesty is realizing this ignorance and being honest about it. You start from there. That's what it means to be a skeptic. The first target of the skepticism is oneself. How do I know that? How do yes, I'm saying everything is one and you're not the body, or Mars is in Venus, and, whatever. Mars trine Venus, whatever. And I talk about these things, but what does it mean? Why am I taking comfort in that? Where is the comfort in that? Is there? Is that really going to do it for me when I'm watching the last breaths go out of this body? That'll be it. That's as far as I got. That Jesus is God or something. That's it.
Yeah, that's what I loved about your book, is that it kind of wiped the slate clean in a lot of ways for me. But for me, when all the dust is settled, the litmus test is, what's my daily life like? What do I wake up like? And what the really, I'm going to be radically honest, the only real difference is that sort of things that would spin out of control in my head, things that Wooder was talking about earlier, ideas, thoughts, patterns, whatever, would spin out of control. They've lost the wind in their sail to in some ways a big degree. And that for me is the litmus test. And I don't care about anything else. I'm actually getting a bit allergic to a lot of the verbiage I see in the whole non-dual, oneness, wordless, choiceless awareness. There's so many words. And I'm actually just using the litmus test of what's my life like. When I go outside for a walk with the dogs, what's that like? What am I seeing? And I actually am seeing things. Like my senses are somehow a little different, and how I observe things. So that for me is everything else just, starts to feel like mind numbing, including even going down the path of self-honesty, because you can go endlessly down that path too in my book. Anyway, I haven't written it yet, but.
Well, that's the point that I tried to make in the book. You don't make a path out of the 10,000 things. It's just something to read and experience. It's not a path. There is no path. I'm not saying that radical self-honesty is a path. What I'm saying is, this is a perilous situation we're all in. And sooner or later, we have to satisfy no one but oneself. That's what has to die. And it's going to be terrible. That's what the Buddhist teaching is about. Old age, illness, and mortality, death. So if you're going to come to a reasonable place with that, which is what we all face sooner or later, For me, probably sooner. For some of you who are still in the prime, quite a bit later, I hope for you. That's what's coming up, though. And then, see, there's no denying that. And so you have to make yourself comfortable in some way, which is not my way, may not be your way. I'm not telling you how to make yourself comfortable. What I'm saying is don't waste your time on this spiritual chit-chat. It will not make you feel comfortable. Even if you manage to convince yourself that it's true, there'll always be this nagging doubt, and you'll have to keep dealing with it. I see this all around me. I can't help it. It's obvious. Among spiritually advanced people, it looks even worse than the hoi polloi. It really does. It's so awkward. I mean, I could see it. And to answer the question from before, why am I so goddamn sure that I could tell who's awake? I'm not goddamn sure, but I can definitely tell. I see a sense of relaxation in people who kind of get it. Let's put it that way. They realize this is a very serious situation, and there's no reason to get nervous if the checkout line takes a little too long. You're going to die. This is a good moment. You're not hearing the sirens of the ambulance coming for you. Take it in, whatever you can. For me, it's, hey, that's a pretty cute girl in the line over there. That's my usual form of escapism. But whatever it is, don't get angry. See, that's all I'm saying. Don't get angry. Don't get in a snit. So I think mortality is the key. And to stop the denial of mortality,
Yes,
is urgent. However we accomplish that, it's not up to me. You know, that's a very private matter. You have a lot to deal with to die. Wow. But all the sages throughout time have said that you have to die moment by moment. You know, Jesus said that if you want to be reborn, you have to die first, etc. So we actually really do need to do this moment by moment. And that's what I mean by awake. It just,
sorry, if I can just throw out that's beautiful. That captures it for me, moment by moment. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you know, David mentioned Walter Chappell. He was a mentor to me. And Walter once said to me, Robert, you have to chew up your life bite by bite, swallow it. And sometimes you have barely enough saliva to get it down. And that was the teaching, the words that most illuminated what I am now calling awake. That opened up a vista. And if we can really understand that, all you ever need to do, all you ever can do is right here in this moment. This is the only place you can intervene. There's no other intervention. There's no other place to get a tool on the work. So,
Robert, can you just say that sentence one more time that you said really got it for you?
Sure.
The part that ended with saliva?
Yeah. Yes, you have to chew up your life and swallow it bite by bite. And sometimes you have barely enough saliva to get it down.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It sure is. That was a good thing to tell Robert. Yeah, well, I see that, you know, we've been going for quite a while now. Is there anybody who really wanted to speak who hasn't had a chance yet at all?
Hi, Robert. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Donna.
Hi. Yeah, I came in the tail end of it, so I'm glad I did because I was having a rough couple days. I deliver food to the poor, and I just started this job about 6 weeks ago. And the conditions that they're living in, and their health, their mental state, just it really brings it home. the aging and the illness and health deteriorating as you age, because most of them are elderly, that I'm going into their homes and bringing them food. And so I come home and I'm not feeling much joy about life, and knowing that, the mortality of my own life, the illnesses that I'm going through with fibromyalgia. I have my hair's falling out from alopecia. I fell on the ice the other day and I can barely walk because I landed on my back. And it just seems to, I lost my job. So, I can't afford to live where I live. I have to start looking for another place. I'm just seeing all this sadness and a lot of a loss of purpose. I was so sure of myself. When I wanted something, I got it. Life was such a pleasure. I had good health, good people. I was involved in groups and worthwhile things, and just there was so much joy. And at this point in my life, I'm seeing the other side of the coin, and I don't like it. And it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. It is what it is. And that sense of not having any control over how life is appearing right now and how my character is playing in it, so to speak, I feel a despair and a sadness, because I'm very awake to this, and I understand that how it's playing out is me. How I'm seeing it is me, and I can't change it until it changes, until the thought comes to change it, till the opportunities appear, and I'm just feeling a real sense of helplessness. In a way, it's good, but in another way, I don't like it.
You want me to comment, Donna?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry for your illness. That's a difficult situation to be in, because a chronic illness is a daily challenge. It's not that you're looking forward to getting over the flu in 2 weeks or something. It's something you just have to wake up with every morning and deal with, right? So that is a challenge already. So I was left wondering if this volunteer work is it a volunteer job, or you're making a living doing this?
It is. I'm getting paid.
Okay, I think you need to look for another job.
I do too.
Okay, so I think I would highly recommend that, because I think someone in your medical situation would be better off in a job where there's some joy in your daily surroundings that you can, melt into a little, instead of some place where you're constantly feeling how tragic this all is and how badly it's going to end. That's a bit tough.
It is.
Yeah. On the other hand, I always have to have the other hand, right? So sorry. On the other hand, there's been these practices in the East of like sitting in the graveyards, inhaling the fumes of the smoldering corpses and all this stuff in order to awaken. So I can't say that your suffering is in vain. I really don't know that. You see what I'm getting at here?
Yes.
Sometimes illness is the greatest teacher. It just might take a while to bear fruit. Yes. But
yes.
I'd look for another job. I hope you can find one.
Well, I just started it about 2 months ago, because I job hopped, because I just have a very low tolerance for mean bosses. And it seems the places that I worked, I was a hairstylist, and then I went into waitressing. There's so much fighting and unhappiness, and the bosses are so mean. I thought, God, is there such a thing as a nice job with nice people, or am I pushing the envelope here to have that kind of expectation?
I think the restaurant business is very difficult. I think the bosses get pretty nasty almost because it's a survival skill in that world. They're always afraid the employees are going to rip them off and steal
Yep.
stuff.
Boy, you hit the nail on the head.
It's a paranoid relationship from the get-go. It's not.
I don't know what direction to go in. I feel, especially since reading you, God bless you. I mean, you knocked me off the non-duality train, and I really appreciate that so much. Because I was on it, looking, for that golden carrot at the end, on the joy and the bliss, and it would rescue me from all this suffering and not knowing. But I'm still left with not knowing and not having a clear direction.
Well, that's quite a testimonial to say I knocked you off the mat, and here you are in this suffering mode, and you still thank me. That's pretty good. I haven't heard anything like that before. Thanks a lot. You kicked my crutches out, and I can't walk, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I'm in a kind of a state of numbness. Like you hit me upside the head with a 2x4.
I really get what you're saying, Donna.
I do.
I totally do. I have a weird sense of humor.
No, I love it.
I get it. I think this sounds like it's going to work out good, but look for another job.
I will. I will.
And
I just wanted to add one other thing. Well, when you have this understanding of really looking at life as it is now, and that is awakening, and you have all your friends still on the non-duality train, and you're like, it's this, it's right now. It's not this or that. It's right this very as it's unfolding, and that has become so clear to me because that was always kind of vague. It was in the dark background. Reading your book, it's really.
That one is made vague intentionally by enculturation. Alan Watts was the guy who turned me on to this. He was great. What he said was this. He said, when you're in kindergarten, they tell you when first grade will really be great. Then you'll have a lot of freedom. So you have to put up with this now, but you're in kindergarten. You have to take your nap and all that. But when you're in the first grade, you'll have this great freedom. Then you get to the first grade and they're telling you, well, the second grade's really great because you get to go out to the playground with the big kids. And it goes on, and you could be on a treadmill like that year after year after year, and your gratification is always in the future.
Yes.
And, okay, well, the truth is that's a good place to put it because then you don't have to admit that you don't have it now. But once you admit that you are not entirely comfortable with the present situation, that's a very good beginning. That's what I mean by radical self-honesty.
Mm-hmm.
See, instead of saying Jesus is Lord, so all this was just intended anyway, I'm just a humble servant, which is bullshit. You just tell yourself, I'm not happy. It's radical self-honesty. See, I don't know what the answer is here, but I know I don't like this. That's good.
Yeah.
But we're encouraged to not do that. We're encouraged to say, yes, I'm not happy now, but if I just, whatever it is, send the $2 into the radio station to the preacher or go to a retreat with the Swami so-and-so, it's all the same. It's not that there's anything wrong with the Swami. He's probably okay, but that's not what we really need. What we really need is for someone to wake us up right now in the present. Wake up.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the spiritual teacher role on for a couple of years because it was urged upon me and actually forced upon me practically. I did it as best I could. This is when I first met John Troy. I was just in the midst of that. This is 2010. I tried it for a couple of years and I saw that it was not a good thing. It's not a good thing because you can't really avoid creating this dependency. You can't. If you claim to be able to teach someone to attain this, you've taken them a step away from it. You've actually put up a new barrier between myself, and now Robert's in there too, and he has to approve, and his method. Yeah, Robert says this, so now unless I'm willing to experience that personally, then I can't get awake. See, that's yes. So
Yes.
it's your experience, Donna. You're suffering.
Mm-hmm. That's what's changed since reading your book drastically for me. Instead of waiting for this me to drop and this self-identity to drop, and then I'll be enlightened, like I felt a lot of the non-dual teachers were saying, I started looking for myself at my daily experiences right now. What was happening for me right now, and truly looking at that as my experience and coming up with my own conclusions. And that made a world of difference. Huge difference, because, and I appreciate you saying so many times, that's your experience. That's your experience. That's this teacher's experience. That's that teacher's experience. And I want my own. I don't want to imitate or take on somebody else's ideas or experiences. I want my own. And that has shifted greatly. And your book is really what brought that about. So.
Thank you so much for saying that, Donna. I highly appreciate it. And I can just tell you, as an older person who's a lot closer to some of these problems than you probably are, I hope you are, it's really important to find your own solution, because as things become more dire, other people's solutions will be less effective, increasingly less effective. It has to be in your heart, whatever that is. And if it's some kind of religious worship and that works for you, great. I mean, I'm not that way. It couldn't work for me, but it doesn't really matter. But you have to find what you have to find.
Yeah, and I don't know how that's going to show up. That's the interesting part. I have no idea.
That's beautiful.
What's going to show up the next minute? None. And that is so freeing. It was scary, but it's freeing, and that it stopped the search. It just stopped it. I'm not looking in books or on YouTube or Googling it or whatever, or going to teachers or retreats. Done. And I just want to bring it home. Just bring it home.
That's really beautiful. I'm completely amazed by the effect that this book has had on people. I wasn't expecting it at all, really. I mean, I wrote this thing, I thought, naturally I like the book, but I actually wasn't expecting. I've heard from so many people now who said this upset my canoe or whatever it was, this flipped my pancake, all these things that people have said. This stopped the search. That's kind of amazing to me. I mean, it wasn't really, I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote it, but not that. Not that. Well, I guess that wraps it up. There's nothing more, nothing further. I think I'm going to try to do one of these for my Facebook page, give people a chance to ask questions live. I like this better than writing, frankly. It's more fun to rant than to type. It's just more immediate. No, it's not really that. I'm pulling my own leg. It's actually the feedback. It's great. This is so magical to me. I have a big screen here. I've got a nice Mac with a big screen, and it's got all of you in boxes on the screen, and it's, as I'm speaking, I can look around and all. It's really quite. It's an innovation. It's lovely, really. It's beautiful. So thanks for showing up, everyone, and thank you for showing up. It's good to see you. I think I've said hello to everyone else who's here. Yes, and then Toria Sky Chain is back. What's up, Doc? Did you record this thing? Did you record it? Oh, great, beautiful. It had its moments. Oh, God. So, okay, I'm pulling the plug.